Do you know who was the deadliest hunter in naval warfare history? One man, a single man, the legendary commander who sank 5 submarines. His name, Frederick John Walker. And today, I'm going to tell you his incredible story. Get ready to listen to this amazing tale. Let's begin. During the darkest days of World War II, the Atlantic Ocean had turned into a real graveyard. Nazi Germany's U-boats were sinking dozens of ships every day to starve Britain into submission. Even Churchill said, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." It was at this very moment that a British sailor stepped in and wrote his name in history with golden letters. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we share incredible true stories like this every day. January 1944, the icy waters of the North Atlantic. HMS Starling, a destroyer hunting the enemy under the command of an extraordinary captain, Captain Frederick John Walker. 48 years old, experienced, determined, and with one single goal: to send every Nazi submarine to the bottom of the sea. But Walker's journey to this point hadn't been easy. In fact, his career was almost over. Born in Plymouth in 1896, Walker came from a family with naval tradition. At 13, he entered the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. Young, ambitious, and talented. During World War I, he served on destroyers and learned firsthand how deadly submarine warfare could be. In the years between the two world wars, Walker specialized in anti-submarine warfare tactics. For hours, days, years, he studied the subject. He developed new tactics, thought up new strategies, but nobody listened to him. The officials in the upper ranks of the Royal Navy found his ideas too radical. When World War II began in 1939, Walker was 43 years old and still not even a destroyer commander. He was merely the captain of a sloop called HMS Stork. Many thought his career had reached its end, but fate had other plans. By late 1941, the situation in the Atlantic was catastrophic. U-boats were sinking 5-6 Allied ships every day to starve Britain into submission. Even Churchill said, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." It was at this very moment that a British sailor stepped in and wrote his name in history with golden letters. On his first mission, he gave his crew a stern speech. "Gentlemen, we're not here on vacation. Our mission is to feed Britain and destroy Nazi submarines, and we will do it. Each of you will be ready, every day, every second, because the enemy is ready too." Walker's approach was completely different from other commanders. Until then, convoy escorts played a passive role. They would just circle around the ships and respond if attacked. Walker, however, saw attack as the best form of defense. His first major test came in December 1941. They were escorting convoy HG-76 from Gibraltar to Britain. 32 merchant ships, and they knew there were at least 10 U-boats around them. On the night of December 17th, the first attack came. U-574 fired a torpedo, but Walker was ready. He detected the submarine with Aztec early sonar and immediately counterattacked. "Full speed, on target," he ordered. HMS Stork charged at the submarine. Depth charges were dropped. Massive explosions threw water into the sky. But it wasn't enough. The U-boat was still alive and trying to escape. Walker didn't give up. He pursued for hours, bombed at every opportunity. His crew was exhausted, but he wouldn't stop. "One more time, gentlemen. We'll finish it this time." And he did. On the morning of December 19th, U-574 was forced to surface. It was damaged, filling with water. The crew tried to surrender, but it was too late. The submarine sank. Walker's first victory. But he didn't stop there. 2 days later, during the same convoy duty, another U-boat was detected, U-131. Don't forget to like this video at this point and help the algorithm reach more people. This time, Walker was even more prepared. He planned a coordinated attack. Together with other escort ships, he trapped U-131, rained depth charges from every direction. The result? U-131 was sunk. 2 submarines, 1 single convoy mission. This was an unprecedented success in the Battle of the Atlantic up to that point. Churchill personally congratulated Walker. The Royal Navy was now listening to his tactics, and most importantly, he was given better ships. In 1942, Walker took command of HMS Starling, a new generation sloop, and became leader of the newly formed 2nd Support Group. This group was specially trained for U-boat hunting. Walker trained his crew mercilessly. He made them drill 12 to 14 hours a day. They rehearsed every possible scenario over and over, because Walker knew that in the ocean, the price of a mistake was death. And the results showed. In March 1943, during a 6-day patrol, he sank 3 more U-boats, U-202, U-381, and U-666. The Germans were shocked. How could one British group be so effective? Walker's secret was simple: intelligence, coordination, and ruthless determination. He used ASDIC and radar technology perfectly. His crew was trained to catch even the smallest signal. And once they detected a U-boat, they never gave up. They would pursue for hours, if necessary, for days. Once, he had chased a U-boat for a full 20 hours. The submarine had tried every maneuver, employed every trick, but Walker was one step ahead every time. Eventually, the exhausted Nazi crew had to surrender. But Walker's greatest success would come in 1944. January-February 1944. In a 2-month period, Walker and the 2nd Support Group sank a full 6 U-boats. 6! This was the highest record achieved by a single group up to that time. The Germans were now afraid of Walker. They called him the U-boat killer. Submarine commanders were ordered to withdraw immediately if they encountered the 2nd Support Group. But at his most brilliant moment, fate would strike a cruel blow. July 1944, Walker was on the bridge of HMS Starling. Years of fatigue, stress, and pressure had consumed him. Being constantly at sea, the never-ending threat, the daily responsibility. One day, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He said nothing to his crew. He continued his duty, because that was Walker. Duty came before everything. July 9, 1944, in Liverpool, HMS Starling had docked. Walker was in his cabin. The pain in his chest was increasing. Finally, he called for a doctor. But it was too late. Cerebral thrombosis, brain hemorrhage. Captain Frederick John Walker died at the age of 48. An entire nation was shocked. It had lost one of its heroes, the Lion of the Atlantic. Thousands attended his funeral. Ships blew their horns in salute. The royal family sent representatives. But Walker's legacy didn't end with his death. He was the architect of the tactics that won the Battle of the Atlantic. His methods became standard. His students spread his teachings. And most importantly, he had shown what courage, dedication, and heroism truly meant. Officially, he sank 5 U-boats, but historical records show that through his group's coordination and leadership, he played a direct role in the destruction of more than 20 submarines. One man, one vision. He saved countless lives. This is the story of Frederick John Walker, U-boat hunter, Britain's hero, defender of the free world. In the next episode, we'll examine Walker's tactics and his most famous operations in detail. How did he think? What strategies did he use? And why did his crew love him so much? Don't miss it. Subscribe.
Welcome back. In the previous episode, we began the incredible story of Captain Frederick John Walker, the man who sank 5 submarines, the legendary hunter of the Atlantic. Today, we'll take a deep dive into his tactics, strategies, and most famous operations. Because Walker wasn't just a brave commander, he was also a strategic genius. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We share amazing stories like this every day. Late 1941. The Atlantic Ocean was witnessing the bloodiest naval battle in history. Nazi Germany's U-boats were systematically destroying Allied convoys. Admiral Karl Dunitz's Wolfpack tactics were working with deadly efficiency. 10, sometimes 15 U-boats would surround a convoy, attack on the surface under cover of darkness, and move on to the next target after sinking their prey. This tactic was so successful that by the end of 1941, Britain faced a genuine disaster scenario. Monthly food supplies were rapidly dwindling. At Churchill's War Cabinet meetings, a terrifying question kept coming up. How much time do we have before we surrender from starvation? It was at this exact moment that Frederick John Walker entered the scene, and he changed the rules of the game. To understand Walker's genius, we first need to understand the convoy escort system of that era. Standard procedure was this. Merchant ships would gather in large groups, a few warships would be positioned around them, and they'd all travel together. The escort ship's role was passive. They'd just circle the convoy and respond if an attack occurred. Walker thought this approach was completely wrong. Why should we wait for prey, he asked his crew on day 1. We're the hunters, so we should act like hunters. We must hunt them before they hunt us. This was a simple but revolutionary idea. Walker's vision was to transform escort ships from passive protectors into active hunters. But a vision wasn't enough. To make this happen, he needed new tactics, new procedures, and a new mindset. First, Walker focused on technology. The ASDIC device, the ancestor of today's sonar, was new and unreliable technology at the time. Most commanders didn't trust it much, but Walker thought differently. He trained ASDIC operators for hours, days on end. He taught them to distinguish underwater sounds, how to tell the difference between a whale sound and a U-boat sound. Every sound tells a story. Your job is to read that story. Indeed, Walker's ASDIC team became so expert that they could estimate a submarine's type, speed, and even diving depth just from its engine sound. Second, Walker understood the importance of coordination. It was difficult for one ship to sink a U-boat alone, but if multiple ships moved in coordination, the submarine had virtually no chance of escape. That's why he developed the creeping attack tactic. What did this mean? It was simple but extremely effective. When a U-boat was detected, one ship, usually his own, would head directly over the target. But instead of attacking, it would just wait above it, like a hunting dog cornering its prey. Meanwhile, other ships would quietly take position and surround the submarine completely. Then, a coordinated attack would begin. Depth charges would rain down from every direction. Whichever way the submarine tried to escape, it would be caught by the bombs. The psychological effect of this tactic was tremendous. When the submarine commander realized he was surrounded, he'd panicked, and panic led to mistakes. Walker was waiting for exactly those mistakes. Third, Walker knew the importance of keeping his crew's morale at the highest level. Serving in the Atlantic was probably one of the war's toughest assignments. Constant danger, freezing cold, rough waves, sleeplessness, fear. But Walker ran his ship like a family. He knew every man. He knew their names. He asked about their families. He listened to their concerns. And most importantly, he trusted them. Gentlemen, he would often say, this ship is not a democracy. I'm the commander, and orders are followed. But know this, each of you is an indispensable part of this ship, even the youngest sailor, because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And on this ship, there is no weak link. These weren't just empty words. Walker genuinely valued his crew. When his ship docked, he personally arranged leave. He gave extra leave to men whose families were ill. He let the tired ones rest. The result? HMS Starling's crew was ready to walk through fire for their commander. And when necessary, they did. Now let me tell you about some of Walker's most famous operations in detail. First operation, HG-76 Convoy, December 1941.
This was Walker's first major success, and the event that shaped his career. The HG-76 convoy consisted of 32 merchant ships traveling from Gibraltar to England, carrying critical supplies, weapons, and fuel. If this convoy had been lost, Britain's war effort would have suffered a serious blow. Intelligence reports were disturbing. At least 10 U-boats were preparing to intercept their route. Donitz's most experienced commanders with the most modern submarines. Walker held a strategy meeting with Convoy Commander Rear Admiral Gerald Creasy. "Sir," Walker said, "conventional escort tactics won't work in this situation. There are too many U-boats. If we stay passive, they'll pick us off one by one." "What do you suggest?" Creasy asked. "Attack. When we detect a U-boat, we'll leave the convoy and hunt. While we're hunting, other escorts will protect the convoy." This was a radical proposal. Normal procedure was for escort ships never to leave the convoy. But Creasy trusted Walker. "Do it," he said, "but be careful." On the night of December 17th, first contact came. The Aztec operator reported, "Contact, range, 2,000 yards, bearing, 045. Walker acted instantly. Full speed, on target, all hands to battle stations. HMS Stork surged forward, but Walker didn't rush. He knew the first attack was rarely successful. He had to be patient. When they reached the target, "Depth charges ready. 3, 2, 1. Fire!" Bomb racks rolled off the ship's stern into the water. Seconds later, massive explosions occurred. Water columns shot into the air. The ship shook. "Aztec operator, contact lost, sir. U-boat diving deep." "That's what we expected," Walker said calmly. "Mark its position. We'll wait above it." And they waited. For hours. The U-boat couldn't escape because Walker was right above it, but it couldn't surface either because death waited there. Finally, on the morning of December 19th, U-574 had to surface because its batteries were exhausted. But the damage was severe. Its hull was riddled with holes, taking on water. The crew jumped into the sea. Minutes later, U-574 sank to the bottom. Walker's first victory. But he wasted no time and immediately returned to the convoy. 2 days later, another U-boat was detected, U-131. This time, Walker coordinated with other escorts. 3 ships surrounded the submarine in a triangle formation. When he gave the "now" command, depth charges rained from all 3 ships simultaneously. The synchronized explosions created hell underwater. U-131 didn't stand a chance. It took a direct hit and sank within seconds. The HG-76 convoy reached England, losing 2 U-boats, but only 2 merchant ships. These numbers were incredibly good for that time. Under normal circumstances, 10 to 15 ships would have been lost in such an attack. Walker had become a hero. Second operation, March 1943, 6-day hunt. March 1943 was the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic, the month when the most tonnage was sunk throughout the entire war. U-boats were attacking uncontrollably. Walker and the 2nd Support Group were specifically assigned to hunt U-boats. They weren't doing convoy escort, they were purely hunting. March 7, 1943, 0600 hours. HMS Starling and her sister ships were patrolling the western approaches. The radar operator picked up a signal. Probable U-boat, surfaced, 8 miles distant. Walker gave his group the order, approach quietly, get as close as possible without being seen. The plan was simple. Ships would approach from different angles and catch the U-boat at a point where it couldn't escape.
But U-202's commander was an experienced sailor. He noticed the radar emissions and sounded the alarm. "Emergency dive! Emergency dive!" The U-boat disappeared underwater, but Walker was ready. He had calculated its position. "ASDIC, find the target." "Contact, range, 1,200 yards, bearing, 045." And the hunt began. It lasted for 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous tracking, attacking, pausing, attacking again. U-202 tried every trick, changed speed, changed direction, hid in water layers, but Walker found it every time. At 2 p.m., U-202 was exhausted, damaged, batteries depleted, crew panicking. One final depth-charge salvo shattered the submarine. Debris floated to the surface, an oil slick spread. Another victory. But Walker wasn't tired. "We continue. There are more U-boats around here." And he was right. 3 days later, they found U-381. 2 days after that, U-666. In 6 days, 3 U-boats, a record that would go down in history. The crew's perspective was crucial here because they knew Walker. One sailor would recount years later, "Captain Walker was the best commander of the war, but what really mattered was that he was like a father to us. He cared for us. When he saw we were tired, he'd personally bring coffee to the bridge. 'A little more, gentlemen, a little more. Then you'll all rest,' he'd say. And when he gave his word, he kept it. We were ready to die for him." Another crew member. "Once, a young sailor had a panic attack. He froze during an attack. Normally, such situations result in disciplinary punishment. But you know what the captain did? He called the boy to his cabin. They talked for 2 hours, then the boy returned and continued working. He received no punishment. And that boy later became one of the bravest sailors on the ship." These stories perfectly summarized Walker's leadership style. He wasn't just a commander, he was a leader, a teacher, a protector. Third operation, January, February 1944, greatest victory. At the start of 1944, the Nazi submarine fleet was still strong. New Type 21 submarines were entering service, faster, quieter, more deadly. But Walker had evolved too. Now there was better radar, better ASDIC, more experienced crew. In January, the 2nd Support Group embarked on a special 6-week hunting operation. First week, 2 U-boats sunk. Second week, 3 more. Third week, 1 more. 6 U-boats in 6 weeks. The Germans were shocked. How could one British group be so successful? Dönitz issued special orders. Avoid encountering the 2nd Support Group. If Walker is there, withdraw. A British commander's name was appearing in enemy orders. An extraordinary situation. Walker had other examples of tactical genius. For instance, the plaster cast maneuver. When a U-boat was detected, ships would form a circular formation around the target. Then the circle would slowly tighten. On each turn, depth charges would be dropped. Whichever way the submarine escaped, bombs were there. Once, after being captured, a U-boat commander told Walker, "We had no chance against your tactics. We were like a mouse caught in a trap." Another secret to Walker's success was making time to rest. Many commanders would stay at sea constantly, exhausting themselves and their crews. Walker was different. He knew that a tired crew makes mistakes, and in the Atlantic, one mistake meant death. So, after each operation, he'd bring his ship to port and give his crew leave. He'd rest too, visit his family. But even in port, he never stopped working. He'd review tactics, develop new strategies, write reports. "War isn't won only at sea," he'd say. "It's also won at the planning table." Now, let me tell you more about Walker's personality. He was a very disciplined man. He'd wake up every morning at 05 o'clock, exercise, have breakfast at the same time every day, write reports in the same format. "You must create order within chaos," he'd tell his crew. "Order is the key to survival." But he was also humane. When enemy sailors surfaced, he'd rescue them, treating them not as prisoners, but as human beings. Once, a German submarine officer asked him, "Why do you treat us so well? We're your enemy." Walker replied, "You're soldiers. You're doing your duty. I'm doing mine. But when duty is done, we're all human." This attitude showed Walker's strength of character. He wasn't just a warrior.
He was a gentleman. And now let's get to the critical question. What was Walker's impact? Official numbers say this. Frederick John Walker directly sunk 5 U-boats, U-202, U-264, U-238, U-424, and U-333. But that's only the small part of the story. The second support group, under Walker's leadership, contributed to sinking over 20 U-boats. More importantly, the tactics he developed were adopted by the entire Royal Navy. Creeping attack, plaster cast, coordinated hunting techniques. These became standard procedure. And the result? From mid-1943 onward, U-boat losses rapidly increased. By 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively won. U-boats were no longer a threat. Walker's contribution was tremendous. But perhaps his greatest legacy was the people he inspired. Hundreds of sailors who worked under him adopted his tactics and leadership style. When they became commanders, they spread Walker's teachings. Even today in Royal Navy academies, Walker's tactics are taught. His leadership principles are shared with young officers. One man, one vision, infinite impact. Let's hit those subscriptions for Hero Walker. Thank you. In the next and final episode, we'll cover Walker's final days, his legacy, and the Battle of the Atlantic's impact on world history. And we'll share some never-before-told private stories about Walker. Don't miss it.
Welcome to the final episode. For 2 episodes now, we've been telling the incredible story of Captain Frederick John Walker, the man who sank 5 submarines, the legendary hunter of the Atlantic. And now we're at the final chapter. We'll examine Walker's last days, his legacy, and the Battle of the Atlantic's place in world history. And we'll share some never-before-told private stories. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. We need your support to keep sharing amazing stories like this. Spring 1944. The fate of the war in Europe was becoming clear. The Allies were preparing for the Normandy invasion. D-Day was approaching. And in the Atlantic Ocean, Walker and his men would make history one last time. But first, let's go back a bit and talk about Walker's personal life, because every hero has a life beyond the battlefield. Frederick John Walker married Eileen Shaw in 1917, a young, beautiful, and intelligent woman. They had 2 children, Timothy and Gillian. Eileen knew very well what it meant to be a sailor's wife, not seeing her husband for months, sometimes years, constant worry, the fear that every morning when she opened the door, there might be an officer bringing bad news. But she was a strong woman, and she supported her husband, always. Walker's son Timothy would recount years later, "We rarely saw our father, but when he was home, he focused completely on us. He'd play games with us, tell us stories. He'd talk about the sea, but he never talked about the war. When he was home, he wanted to forget the war." Walker's daughter Gillian said, "My father was very kind, but at the same time, very strict. He taught us discipline. To succeed in life, you must master yourself," he would say. I never forgot those words. In 1943, while Walker was on brief leave in Plymouth, he went on a picnic with his family. It was a rare moment. The war was miles away for a few hours. His son Timothy asked him, "Dad, when will the war end?" Walker replied, "Soon, son, very soon. And when it's over, we'll buy a house by the sea. We'll be together every day." Sadly, this dream would never come true. Now, let's move to the summer of 1944, Walker's final operation. June 1944, the largest amphibious landing in history. 156,000 Allied soldiers were landing on the beaches of Normandy. Operation Overlord had begun, and Walker and the Second Support Group received a critical mission to clear the English Channel of U-boats. The Germans had sent submarine packs to the landing zone. If these U-boats reached the landing craft, the result could be catastrophic. Thousands of soldiers would die. The operation would fail. Walker was given his orders. "You will let no U-boat through. None." He said, "Understood, sir." None will get through. And none did. On the night of June 5, HMS Starling and her sister ships took position. They formed a barrier at the western entrance to the English Channel. Radar and ASDIC were operating at full power. At midnight, first contact came. U-955, heading toward Normandy. Walker ordered a coordinated attack. 4 ships surrounded the submarine. After a 2-hour hunt, U-955 was sunk. 0400 hours. Second contact. U-970. Same fate. Afternoon. Third contact. U-821. Sunk. 3 U-boats in 1 day, and none had reached the Normandy beaches. D-Day became one of the most successful operations in military history, and a small but critical reason for this was that Walker and his men protected the seas. Eisenhower would later write, "The success of the Normandy landing depended on many factors, but undoubtedly, security of the sea lanes was one of the most critical." One of the heroes who provided that security was Captain Walker. But this intense operation would extract a heavy price from Walker. Walker's last days. Throughout June, Walker barely rested. He was on the bridge 18 to 20 hours a day. Sleep deprivation, stress, pressure, it was all building. His crew began to worry. The captain didn't look like himself. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes. Sometimes he'd be out of breath climbing stairs.
The first officer had asked him, "Sir, shouldn't you rest? Maybe a few days leave?" Walker shook his head firmly. "No, our mission isn't finished yet. We don't have time to rest." But his body had reached its limits. In early July, HMS Starling returned to Liverpool for a brief maintenance stop. On the evening of July 7th, Walker was in his cabin writing reports. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. His pen dropped. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He waited a few minutes, hoping it would pass, but the pain was increasing. Finally, he called the deck watch. "Get the doctor, immediately." When the ship's doctor arrived, he understood the seriousness. "Sir, we must get you to hospital immediately." Walker protested. "No, I'll stay on the ship. I'll be better tomorrow." "Sir, please, this is serious." But Walker was stubborn, and the doctor couldn't force him. That night, Walker stayed on the ship, but his condition was deteriorating. The morning of July 9th, early hours, the first officer went to check the captain's cabin. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still no answer. He opened the door. Walker lay motionless in his bed. "Captain! Captain!" But it was too late. Frederick John Walker had passed away at age 48. Cerebral thrombosis, brain hemorrhage. The news shocked the ship. The crew couldn't believe it. Their captain, the invincible man, was gone. One sailor said through tears, "He was a father, our father. How can this be? He couldn't die. He never died." The news spread to Liverpool, then London, then all of Britain. Newspaper headlines: "Hero Captain dies." "Atlantic's lion leaves us." "U-boat hunt ends." Churchill issued a special message. "Captain Walker was one of our nation's bravest sons. His service will never be forgotten. Thanks to him, countless lives were saved. Thanks to him, this island's freedom was preserved." King George VI sent a letter of condolence to his family. July 13, 1944, Walker's funeral. Liverpool Cathedral. Thousands attended. The streets couldn't contain them. Hundreds of officers and sailors from the Royal Navy were there. Government officials, ordinary citizens. Everyone had come to bid farewell to their hero. The coffin was draped with a flag. His medals rested on top: Distinguished Service Order, DSO, and 3 bars. This was an extraordinary honor. During the funeral service, all ships in the harbor sounded their whistles. 1 minute of silence. Only the sounds of whistles could be heard. Thousands wept silently. Walker was buried in St. Mary's Churchyard in Wallasey. His gravestone bore these words: "Captain Frederick John Walker, DSO and 3 bars, RN, 1896-1944, U-boat hunter. He did his duty to the end. Walker's legacy. Walker's death was much more than the loss of one man. It was the loss of a symbol, a legend. But his legacy lived on. The tactics Walker developed became standard procedures for the Royal Navy. These methods, known as Walker tactics, were used until the end of the war. Officers trained under him spread these tactics when they became commanders. An unofficial group formed called the Walker School. These officers remained faithful to Walker's principles: aggressive tactics, coordination, care for the crew, never giving up. After the war, Walker's contributions were officially recognized. The Royal Navy named a destroyer class in his honor. HMS Walker entered service in 1946. In the 1970s, a monument was erected in Liverpool. The monument shows Walker on the bridge, looking toward the horizon through binoculars. It's still there, still watching, still protecting. But perhaps the most beautiful monument was in people's hearts. Years later, former crew members would gather to remember Walker. They'd tell stories, they'd laugh, they'd cry. A former sailor said in an interview in the 1980s, "I worked with many commanders in my life. Good ones, bad ones, mediocre ones, but there was no one like Captain Walker. He taught us not just how to fight, but how to live. Honor, courage, loyalty, I learned these from him. 40 years have passed, but I still hear his voice. A little more, gentlemen, a little more."
Unknown facts about Walker. Now let me tell you some little-known facts about Walker. 1. Walker's diary. Walker kept a private diary. In it, he wrote not just operations, but his thoughts and feelings. The diary was given to his family after his death and remained secret for many years. In the 1990s, his family donated the diary to the Royal Navy Museum. Its contents offer a fascinating glimpse into Walker's inner world. An entry from March 1943. Today we sank 3 U-boats. Victory? Perhaps. But there were hundreds of German sailors in those submarines. Young men. Maybe they have children, wives, mothers waiting for them. But this is war, and I must do my duty. Still, I pray for them every night. This entry shows Walker's humanity. He wasn't just a killer. He felt the weight of what he did. Another entry from June 1944. I'm so tired. My body isn't what it used to be, but I can't stop. Too many people depend on me. My crew, my country, my family. I must endure a little longer. The war is almost over. A little more. Sadly, a little more never came. 2. Walker and a German sailor. Very few people know this, but Walker treated captured German submarine crews very well. Once, he rescued 12 survivors from a U-boat he'd sunk. He gave these German sailors, shivering from cold, dry clothes and served them hot soup. The German officer asked, in astonishment, "Why are you helping us? We're your enemy." Walker replied, "War stays on the battlefield. You're no longer on the battlefield. You're human now, and I help humans." This German officer wrote a letter to Walker's family after the war. "Your husband saved me and my men, not just physically, but by treating us with dignity. He was a true gentleman. His loss is not just Britain's, but humanity's." 3. Walker's last wish. Walker updated his will a few weeks before his death. He wrote to his family about how to distribute his belongings. But the most interesting part was this statement: "If I receive medals when I die, I want them shared with my crew, because these achievements aren't just mine, they belong to every one of my men. Without them, I could have accomplished nothing." His family honored this wish. Copies of Walker's medals were made and distributed to crew members. One sailor would say years later, "This medal is my most precious possession, because it's not just a piece of metal, it's a symbol of Captain Walker's trust in me." The Battle of the Atlantic's impact on world history. Now let's look at the bigger picture.
How did the Battle of the Atlantic and Walker's role change world history? Between 1939 and 1945, over 3,500 Allied ships sank in the Atlantic Ocean. 72,200 sailors died. Most were sunk by U-boats. If Germany had won the Battle of the Atlantic, Britain would have been forced to surrender from starvation. And if Britain fell, Nazi Germany would have completely controlled Europe. America couldn't have invaded Europe alone. The Soviets would likely have been defeated, and the world would be a very different place. But this didn't happen, because heroes like Walker protected the oceans. Historian Stephen Roskill wrote after the war, "The Battle of the Atlantic was the most critical campaign of World War II, and in this battle, the contribution of a few men was disproportionately large. Captain Walker was certainly one of those men. His tactics, leadership, and courage changed the course of the war." Churchill wrote in his memoirs, "Only one aspect of the war truly frightened me: the U-boat threat. If we had lost the sea lanes, we would have lost everything. But thank God we had magnificent commanders like Walker." Walker's impact today. Today, 80 years later, Walker's legacy still lives on. At the Royal Navy Academy, young officers learn Walker's tactics. His leadership principles are in textbooks. NATO anti-submarine warfare doctrines have been influenced by strategies Walker developed. And more importantly, he still inspires. Every year on July 9th, Walker's death anniversary, a memorial service is held in Liverpool. Former sailors, young students, citizens gather. They lay wreaths. They observe a moment of silence.
And they tell his story to new generations, because some stories must never be forgotten. Walker's family. How did Walker's family live after his loss? His wife Eileen never remarried after 1944. She remembered her husband until the end of her life. She passed away in 1972 and was buried beside her husband. His son, Timothy, joined the Royal Air Force. He decided to follow in his father's footsteps. He served as a pilot in the 1950s. He told his children stories about their grandfather. His daughter, Jillian, became a teacher. She dedicated her life to education. In a 2005 interview, she said, "I missed my father terribly, but I was also proud of him. He was there when the world needed him. He did his duty, and that is the greatest honor." Today, Walker's grandchildren and great-grandchildren live in Britain. They too proudly tell their grandfather's story. Final thoughts. Frederick John Walker didn't just sink 5 U-boats. He created a mindset shift. He initiated the transition from passive defense to active attack. And this change determined the fate of the Battle of the Atlantic. He was a perfect tactician, but more importantly, he was a perfect leader. He saw his crew as family. He cared for them, and in return, they showed him infinite loyalty. He was a humane warrior. He destroyed his enemies, but respected them, because he knew the real enemy was ideology, not people. And he sacrificed his life for his duty, literally. Even when his body said no, he said yes until his last breath. Today, in the 21st century, what can we learn from Walker? First, leadership isn't just giving orders. Leadership is being an example. Walker never asked anything of his crew that he wasn't ready to do himself. Second, success lies in the details. Walker paid attention to every small detail, from ASDIC training to crew rest. Everything mattered. Third, don't lose your humanity. No matter how difficult, no matter how much pressure you're under, preserve your humanity. Walker did this, even in the darkest times. Fourth, leave a legacy. Walker didn't just sink U-boats. He left a roadmap for future generations. Tactics, principles, values. And now, a question for you. What kind of legacy do you want to leave in your own life? How can you resist challenges like Walker? And most importantly, what difference can you make for others? Share your thoughts in the comments. These aren't easy questions, but they're worth thinking about. In the war's final days, a young sailor asked Walker, "Sir, what do you think makes a hero?" Walker replied, "A hero isn't a man who doesn't fear. A hero is a man who does his duty despite his fear. A hero is a man who sacrifices himself for others, and a hero is a man who never gives up." That was Frederick John Walker's definition, and that's why he was a true hero. The Lion of the Atlantic, the U-boat hunter, defender of Britain and a free world. Born in 1996, died in 1944, but his legacy is eternal. Every wave tells his story, every ship sails in his honor, and every free breath is a result of his sacrifice. Let's not forget, let's appreciate, and let's be inspired. Because heroes like Walker changed the world. Quietly, humbly, but permanently. And now, an announcement. In our next video, we'll tell the story of another unknown British hero. This time, a commando unit that fought the Japanese in Burma. The story of these heroes, known as the Chindits, is incredible. Incredible courage, incredible sacrifice, incredible adventure. Don't miss it, because this is as compelling as Walker's story. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, history isn't just in the past. History is today. Because the choices we make today will write tomorrow's history. Walker did this. You can too. See you soon. And never forget, freedom isn't free. We're free today because someone paid the price. That someone was Frederick John Walker. Salute to him.